Welcome to a football show, Thursday edition, the pre-agency preview. That's right. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group.
Because Monday will technically, the show that you are missing, me and Stoney will be doing a free agency preview. This is a free agency philosophy show.
Okay. I like that better. I like that. This is more of a 401 class of philosophy where then we get back to orientation on Monday. I like that. No, forced family vacation coming up next week, of course, for spring break while Metro schools are out. So yes, Stoney is in on Monday. Everyone get excited about that. Please hit the subscribe button if you are watching on YouTube. We would really appreciate that. Share the product if you are watching elsewhere, Twitter or Facebook. We do appreciate that as well. And if you catch us on the podcast feed, thank you for listening. We do appreciate it. Give us a 5-star review, because if you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville. First of all, we are going to spend a lot of time talking about, you're exactly right, a free agency philosophy course today on the program. But it's a lot of different, it's players that we like, it's strategies we like or don't like, it's how do we define things like overpaying or oversigning. We've got all kinds of stuff to get to today on the show. We have 9 different players who've been tagged across the league. How does that affect the Titans strategy? Lots of good stuff to do. But I got to say, we can't give you any details. We can't give you any details. Not yet. But Zach and I have had some conversations. Had some conversations with some other folks. Had some conversations with even more folks. And the Sinkers Beverages 440 Sports Football Show F-Words draft party is going to be ridiculous this year. I just want to put it out there. It's going to be ridiculous, and you're going to want to be a part of it. It's going to be very what's the word I'm looking for? Very
I would say very unique compared to what we did last year, which I felt was unique.
It's going to be unique, exclusive.
It's a glow up. It's a draft show glow up. There you go.
It is a draft party glow up. So you're going to want to be a part of it. The number one thing you have to remember: sign up at Sinkers Beverages for the in crowd. Okay, that's their mailing list. They don't abuse the privilege to have your number or whatever, your email list. All they do is provide good service to you. And Bluegrass Beverages has their version of it as well, so sign up there as well. Just make sure you sign up and take care of what's going on, because you're going to want to be a part of this. And it's going to be, you have to sign up for the in crowd, and you got to be watching the shows if you want to be a part of what's going on in the draft. I cannot wait. It's going to be a ton of fun. So make sure you check out Sinkers Beverages. And of course, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. There you go. Lots of good stuff happening from the Kingston Group, Nashville's locally owned custom home and remodeling firm. Also, I know we said this on Monday, but I'll start now because it's now sort of, I think people are starting to figure out, like, congratulations to you again on Stacking the Inbox, partnering up with Paul Kaharski. It's all in the family. We got Herndon and you and PK and 440 Sports. It's all in the family here. We're keeping it all in the family.
There you
so
go.
Congratulations.
It's just a big incestual company.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. That's one way of putting it. So a lot of you folks already in the comment section. We do appreciate it. So go ahead and give us a share there. I know PK just ending his show. So if you're coming over from PK, we do appreciate it. So look, just keep it in the family. Just keep it in the family.
The family.
All right. I know there's 9 players that have been tagged: Josh Allen, Brian Burns, Kyle Duggar, T. Higgins, Jalen Johnson. You got Michael Pittman, L'Jarius Sneed, Antoine Winfield. I think I got them all. Oh, why am I drawing a blank on Baltimore Ravens tag? The big defensive lineman.
Justin Mabuduike.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Only 6 were tagged last year.
Big Dookie. The Big Dookie.
The Big Dookie.
That would be easier for you to remember.
That actually is significantly easier to remember. Buffalo, of course, had a 12 different movements with different players and different things. It's been a bloodletting and also some like contract extensions and like just things are starting to happen. And for those that don't know, you've got Monday, 11 a.m. Central Time is when legal tampering begins, of course, and then 3 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday of next week will be the official start of free agency. So we got a lot of stuff to get to. We're going to get to linebackers, safeties, running backs, receivers, lots of stuff to do today from a philosophical standpoint.
The free agents that you are seeing sign already are players that were cut before their contract expired on the new league year. So Jonnu Smith, those are considered street free agents. So I just wanted you guys to know. So like Mitchell Trubisky, Jonnu Smith, they were able to sign because they were cut before their contract ran out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Azeez Al-Shaair can't sign anywhere because he is still technically a Tennessee Titan until the deadline free agency on March 13th, unless they give permission to speak with other teams in legal tampering period.
There is no other show where you're going to get that kind of detailed analysis of free agent structure and also, Stoney Keeley, am I going to need to shave my pubes for the party? Just want to put that out there. Brian, what's up, fellas? Of course, Ed already jumping in here. Congrats, Zach, on writing for PK. Do you get a press pass now for camp? We'll see about.
I don't think I really want one. I'm not a press pass guy. I'm just not that guy.
But
I'm not a guy that really needs to go ask the questions. I just expect everybody else to be smarter when they ask questions.
Yes.
I'm more of a demander than they do.
So be as critical as possible of all the people that are there without showing up yourself. Okay. All right. I got it. That's fair. So
there's 30 of you. Could one of you all ask a question that's smart? I mean, do you really need a 31st person?
Probably not. Probably not. If you would like to follow along Zach's free agency tool, he now has 2 tools. Zach,
2 tools.
One
tools coming.
One extraordinarily glorious combine tool that you can go play around with his tool if you'd like.
Updated it this morning with some bench numbers for the offensive linemen. I hadn't gotten around to that yet.
So grateful and glad you did. Stackingtheinbox.com, of course, there. And then, but the free agency tool is now, of course, live over at paulkaharski.com. So there you go. It's all in the family. It's all there. So
a little bit more. And I know I don't want Stacking Inbox people to get jealous or anything. It's coming for you guys. It's just how these content scheduling work this week with free agency 101 through 301 webinars over at stackinginbox.com. And this is the only chance I get to write for PK before free agency. So I was like, well, I'll unleash the tool over there and let those be my guinea pigs.
I think you need to get consent before you unleash the tool. Just want to make sure everybody understands. Look, it's going to be a wild couple of weeks here on the program and across all the platforms. So just stay tuned. Again, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you're going to stackingtheinbox.com, paulkaharski.com, all that great stuff. So, okay, let's get started with. There's a phrase, and I get a phrase when I was on radio a lot that was like, "Oh, big game hunting." I want to go big game hunting. That's a phrase that a lot of folks, a lot of callers use when they want to describe a strategy for a particular team. Obviously, in this case, we're talking about the Titans. Overpaying is another one that comes to mind when you first start talking about a team strategy going into free agency. We've had teams that go extremely big. We've seen Jacksonville do it. We've seen Philadelphia do it. We've seen teams try to do it. Historically, it doesn't really work, but on an individual player-by-player basis, maybe it can. How do you think people should look at the term overpaying? And when it comes to the Titans' positions of need, philosophically, what does that mean to you?
Well, I understand how media works. I mean, obviously, the initial reaction is either it's a good contract or bad contract right when the tweet comes up. They either overpaid or underpaid. There is no, or it's a steal of a deal, or that's just good value.
Yep.
You know, we don't know what it is until we see all the details. And for me, overpaying kind of has to live up to the player has to live up to their part as well, right? I mean, you can say that initially everybody thought the Jaguars overpaid for Christian Kirk. Well, he has performed like a wide receiver too, and in hindsight now, his contract looks like a wide receiver two's contract.
Yep.
That's a good deal. So, but everybody initially thought, including myself. So this is something that I've evolved over time with, is that it's not really an overpay. And a lot of people thought that the Mike Evans thing was an overpay. And I'm like, no, that's first off, it's Mike Evans, who has never not had a 1,000-yard wide receiving season
ever,
and has played with some of the worst quarterbacks the NFL has technically ever seen on a consistent basis. And he just performs. You know, I think you're going to have to, quote unquote, overpay, meaning you're going to have to pay more than someone else for a player. Obviously, that's how contract negotiations work. But there are certain positions this year that maybe they should spend a little bit more on, and other positions they should spend a little bit less on. Center comes to mind. Now, the center market is they just got Mitch Morse added. There'll be maybe a few other cuts, but it's a really good top 3 guys. The Titans should be spending money on center. I'm not so sure the Titans should be overpaying for one of these left tackles. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
overpaying or be in the market to overpay technically for any of these wide receivers. Just because they have those holes doesn't mean that's how you should spend your money. And I do think they will spend a lot of money in terms of a lot of players are going to get signed, but I don't think the actual money part is going to be as high as everybody thinks. It's about getting, you have a roster. We went over it last week, right? Or 2 weeks ago. There are 4 starters on defense. Okay. That means you have to find 7 starters. And not all of those are going to be top of the market starters. Luckily, linebackers and safeties seem to have some pretty good steals and value at them.
Yeah.
So, yes, they'll be aggressive, but I don't think they are going to spend. They're not going to have 5 or 6 top of the market contracts at the end of the first or second wave of the offseason. And that's the smart way to build.
Well, and ultimately, I also think overpaying, like to your point about how media works, like the second the story breaks, every sports talk show has to spend every segment with a winner and a loser. You got to have a take. Got to have a take. Somebody won, somebody lost. Somebody won, somebody lost. You got to grade it. It's got to be graded. You got to give it a letter grade. If you don't give it a letter grade, you're not doing your job. Ultimately, what matters is, and actually, philosophically, I'm okay with overpaying if you have a ton of cap space, a ton of holes, but you still get a floor of a player, if that makes any sense. Like, if a player is really worth $5 million a year, and in this case, center, let's say maybe it's worth more than that, but maybe interior offensive line is the area we're saying, all right, I like the depth a little bit better in this free agency class. They certainly have some holes they could plug there. Center is the primary hole, but if Brunskill can maybe play center, maybe you're going guard, maybe you're putting a bunch of different people in there to compete. If a guy's worth $5 million, but you pay him $7 million, but he still delivers you $5 million worth of production, that's still better than what you had before. That's still a huge step in the right direction. And so even if you do overpay, and maybe middle linebacker is an example of this as well. Let's say you pay $10 million for a linebacker, which would be high end of the market. You pay $10 million for a linebacker, but he's only like $7 million good. Well, that's still like $6 million better than your other option, which might be like Otis Reese at this point. So like it's okay to overpay if you're still getting something, if you're still, especially in a situation where this team is not trying to win a championship this year and has a shit ton of cap space. So I think, and we'll get to Calvin Ridley a little bit later on. We'll get to Patrick Queen in a second. We'll get to a lot of things, but I agree. I think you have to sort of like strategically overpay and strategically underpay, if that makes sense. I think the talk radio, they paid too much. Like that's just, it's either going to be great deal or you pay too much, and that's not the way the world works. Certainly just not the way football works. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I use the term, I think the Titans are going to be thrifty, and people think, well, that means they're going to be cheap. No, thrifty means they're going to be very smart and not wasteful with their money. But they have so many holes, they're going to have to spend money, right? You have to spend money, but does not mean that you have to go out and pay Tyron Smith top of the market left tackle money when you have maybe Becton, who can get you, on a cheap 1 year, 2 year deal, or you could just keep Andre Dillard, who may be the same as Mekhi Becton at this point. I don't know. There is a distinct possibility that you may just continue to pay who you already have a contractual obligation with.
So I
don't know, but I mean, like, to me, these people who think that, well, they got the money, so they might as well go and pay and be aggressive and pay Calvin Ridley, or they may as well go be aggressive and go after Chris Jones or Christian Wilkins or either of these guys. They have to do it, or they're just wasting their time. I don't think that you have to. I mean, like, I don't think there is any player you have to sign, but I do think there are positions you have to sign. There aren't any players you have to overspend for, but there are players that you could spend a high amount of money that may look like a slight overpay now, but in a few years, we're going to look back on it and say, well, it's not that bad of a deal, unless they restructure it like 30 times like they did with Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry.
Well, and it's also, man, and that doesn't even, like, the idea and the philosophy around overpaying as a general practice doesn't even take into account a younger player who may completely change and outperform and develop into a different player. It's one thing to overpay Tyron Smith, a guy who's like 32 and 33 or whatever he is, and he's really kind of is what he is. You're not going to develop into something different. You are what you are. If anything, there's maybe a decrease in production coming. If you get a guy who's 24 or 25, there's a chance you could make them into more, which is sort of what happened with Aziz Al-Shair last year. I want to point out what Bo has to say here, just because I don't want to miss it, even though we're going to go to running back and receiver later. Bo says, if you're going to overpay, how you doing, Bo, by the way? If you're going to overpay a position, it would be running back. You'll go broke overpaying wide receivers. I could not disagree more with that. I think overpaying for running backs, and we're going to get to that market in just a second, but I think that's one of the, especially with this class and with having Sharp already as Spears, having Spears as a guy who's already on the team. I think you go real cheap at running back. I don't think you overpay at running back. Like, what are you going to do? Go get Saquon Barkley and push Tajay Spears down the depth chart? That makes no sense to me. Sorry, Bo.
I don't think overpay and running backs are going to go hand in hand anyway, if that makes sense. The running back market, the linebacker market, and the safety market are set up for the most part for you to find quality starters at value prices. So quality products at cheap prices. It's that's what you are able to get because that's what the market has done. You see all these safeties, and let me pull it up, and I have not read the article, but the tweet pretty much sums up the article, what it's about. And it's from, is his name Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports. Where is it?
Well, and you look it up real fast. Bo says running backs are cheap. And if your point, Bo, is that you're overpaying like $3 million for a $1 million running back, then I might be on board with it. I was thinking big ticket item overpaying for a big name versus, hey, maybe Gus Edwards is the guy you really like and he's worth $2.5 million. Well, you need to overpay $3.5 million to get him, but because he's still a very small ticket item, it's still value for your football team. So maybe I misunderstood there, Bo.
So basically the safety. So when Justin Simmons got cut from the Broncos this morning, because we've seen several safeties get cut over the last few weeks. Some of them are on the wrong side of 30, but some of them are just under 30. But he said deep passes are down, short passes are up, and too high looks abound in the NFL today. I look at why teams are getting out of the expensive safety business around the league. And that is the trends, the way that the defenses are deployed and offenses are deployed dictate what the market actually looks like. It dictates who actually gets cut. And safeties are becoming more expendable as it goes on. You see guys that are able to come in fairly quick and make an impact at safety. Same for running back. Same for inside linebacker for the most part, as long as you're not spending on Jack Gibby or other losers like that. Stay away from people with names that belong at the Pi Kappa Phi fraternity house, and I think we'll be okay. But I do think that when you really look at it, that the play around the league dictates what free agency is, not just the market itself and the players that get contracts. It's that wide receivers become more valuable because the league is trending more to a pass-heavy approach, and running backs become less valuable because you can go to the Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl with a guy for $1 million.
Yep. All right. Let me get some of the questions in here real fast, Zach. I want to ask you. So some guy named Eastone Frise says, I reached the point where the sadist in me is worn out. Check out the Hot Read podcast, by the way, with Easton and JT. I want to keep Dillard and try to fix him with Bill's magic. I am curious because you and I kind of danced around this. Like, I mean, is it worth $2.5-3 million to just have a seventh tackle on the depth chart? Like, if you're already going to pay the 7.5 or $8 million, just pay the 10 and have a body? Where are you on that? Have you come around on that? Or
I could see the approach. It's a couple of days into free agency, according to Over the Cap. In fact, I think it's a week after the tampering period, according to Over the Cap, which that date has changed from a couple week or so ago. But if they do that and keep Andre Dillard up until that point, it may just be, I don't know if Andre Dillard's going to get cut before free agency begins, but they could sign a guy that proceeds to have Andre Dillard get cut, a post-June 1st designation to save them more money later on in the future. And maybe that's still what they're waiting for. Maybe they're trying to work maybe a negotiation process to renegotiate his contract down right now and still keep him as a 7th or 8th body.
Yep.
or maybe they're just going to release him the day that they legally can and declare to June 1st. Maybe they're just waiting just to wait, even though you can say you're cutting a guy and then officially make it official and designate it post June 1st.
Yep.
But for the most part, I don't know what they're going to do with Andre Dillard, because it's been really hard to predict really what this free agency is going to look like, because this is the first time we don't really have a lot of information to go off of.
Well, and they also they also have so much money to play with. They could deploy a lot of different strategies, and
we just don't know what Rand Carthon, Brian Callahan are really going to do quite yet, because you can say, well, the Bengals have done this and done that, but how much is that Brian Callahan? Same over here with San Francisco. You could say that Rand Carthon, how much of that is Rand Carthon? And they've never worked together.
Yep.
So it'll be real interesting to see. I'm still at there's a 50% chance, 15% chance that Andre Dillard is on this team, but that's still where I'm at. That has not changed since the combine, has not gone up, not gone down, but that's still a very, very small chance that
I think I'm kind of in agreement. I'm in the 20% range. I think there's a chance, anyway. Here's a good one. Trey, of course, good to see you, man. Was D-Hop an overpay? And I think that is the ultimate sort of example of...
Let's not cut that question off, because the meat to the question is at the very end. I think he could have been an overpay for sure.
Well, so
if Tannehill was the guy all year, how the fuck does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't understand.
Sorry, Trey, basically, that makes zero sense.
I agree with you that Trey's question at the end doesn't make sense, but I really like I like the question on the front end, was because I was actually thinking this. I think DeAndre Hopkins was an overpay, but I think it's an overpay that is smart. It's an overpay that's logical. It's a shrewd overpay, because you had an enormous position of need. The calendar at the time of the year you had no other options to go get a player of that. And it certainly, while he may not be 17, whatever the number was, 17 million, or I guess it's 13 and then 17, he may not have been that good relative to another receiver getting that amount of money. He was so much more important to Will Levis and than he was to Ryan Tannehill. That's where I don't understand the overpay part for the Tannehill part of that question. But I think
Tannehill would have gotten the number one wide receiver, would have force fed the number one wide receiver. Yeah. That's what he always does. So that's a little crazy.
All right, scrolling through here.
Here's what I will say about this DeAndre Hopkins overpay. Is it an overpay to have a 1,000-yard receiver to pay him $13.8 million and $14 million in cash for last year and this year? Is that an overpay?
I mean, probably not. No, it's a number two. Like your point, it's kind of like a number two contract.
That's a number two contract for a number one wide receiver.
Yeah, but I would argue that in this team, in this offense with Mike Vrabel and Tim Kelly and Ryan Tannehill, that number one receiver is kind of a number two, production wise. So again, I don't think it's
true.
You could argue.
So it wasn't. To me, it was never an overpay, and it was in fact a fantastic deal, because you could have got out of it and only paid $13.8 million in cash and be out of the contract if he wasn't what he was. And paying 13.8 for a 700 wide receiver at this day and age, 700-yard wide receiver, is kind of the going rate. So I just don't think it was never an overpay.
Jesse says, would you guys go number one pick, wide receiver, offensive line? I'm not going to ignore the question, but we spent a lot of time talking about that on last.
It's also this is free agency season, my friend. We got to get through the free agency season. Yeah, draft season's after beginning of April.
Yeah, we've turned the page. We're into free agency, which again starts on Monday. Here's the one that I do think interesting, because I think it leads to big ticket items. Logan says, go get Christian Wilkins or Chris Jones, pair them with Simmons, and you have an elite position group at least. No question about the last part of that. If you put Jones and Simmons together, or Wilkins and Simmons together, you've got an elite defensive line. I think people need to pump the brakes on big ticket items like that. Everyone gets caught up, fans, media, everybody. We all do it. We're all guilty of it, that we get caught up on the biggest name at a position. And right now, you could argue that Jones is the number one free agent regardless of position. You could also argue that Wilkins is a top 5 free agent regardless of position.
And he had a weird tweet today that I guess you could take it either way. Chris Jones did is KC ... but it was him and Andy Reid celebrating. So is that him saying goodbye or him resigning? I think they still get a deal done for Chris Jones. I think they keep L'Jarius Sneed because I don't think
Yeah,
anybody's
I
going to
agree.
trade for L'Jarius Sneed, but we'll talk about that later.
I agree.
For me, the big ticket items either have all been tagged, and I think the only big ticket item that the Titans should be spending money on, and this is going to sound crazy, but I'm telling you, it's the smartest way to use your money if you start looking at statistics, wins above average, the career value, and all this stuff. It's Patrick Queen. That is the only guy they should go and spend big money on is Patrick Queen.
All right. So
it's
first
be
of all,
difficult though.
If you are only listening to this in podcast form or on Twitter, we love you guys, but you got to see the comment section right now. You need to come over to YouTube and come hang out in the comment section because Stoney's just over here just destroying the entire world. But I think that's a good transitionary point. Of course, a football show here brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, our two great proud sponsors. Again, reminder, draft party information coming soon. Sign up at the in-crowd for Sinkers and Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. You have to sign up to get the information. We're going to start selling. We're going to start talking about what we're going to be doing at the draft party. Can't wait for that as well. Okay, so that brings us to Patrick Queen. And obviously this is a position of need. There are no current starting players on the team. There are no current backups really on the team. There are no members of the linebacking core on the team.
It's Otis Reese in a room by himself as he's that Fresh Prince team where he's just looking around. Nobody's there. It's Otis Reese. And Otis Reese is maybe a starter in 2 years, but he's not a guy that can be a starter.
I agree.
Even though he does have that dog in him that Denard Wilson talked about.
I agree. So ultimately, and again, it depends on what this is where we go right back to like what's an overpay, what's an underpay, what would win, quote unquote, win the conversation from a dollar figure with Patrick Queen or not. This is a guy who was paired with Roquan Smith, so you can't take that out of the equation. Extremely good coaching staff, extremely well coached. Certainly somebody that knows him, with Denard Wilson being the defensive coordinator here. Why is he the name of all the names? Why is he the name that you would go overpay for to bring in at that position?
Well, the Titans need obviously 2 linebackers, right? And he is by far the best linebacker, but he also knows he's familiar with Denard Wilson enough, whatever system that he chooses to deploy, Denard Wilson, from their time at Baltimore, that he could be your green dot, get everybody in line, keep everybody. This is the winning culture of the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to play behind one of the best in Jeffrey Simmons. I'm going to be able to get everybody in their spots, and I'm very reliable. And here's the thing. The 49ers and the Ravens don't really take their linebackers off the field. So you have to find 2 guys in this class that can do all phases of the game, at least at an average NFL level. Now, Patrick Queen does everything at an above average level. But if you go and look at the snaps, 49ers, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner. Fred Warner played at 1,200 defensive snaps. Greenlaw played 999. The next closest was Oren Burks at 433.
No, thanks.
That's insane how much they played. And Aziz Al-Shaair played a lot last year.
Yeah, he did.
Baltimore was the same way. Queen was 1,246. Roquan Smith was 1,192. The next highest was Malik Harrison at 226 snaps, which is insane. So, insane all that, he is clearly the best linebacker in this class. The problem is that you are going to have the Seattle Seahawks, who have $44.2 million in cap space currently, who are losing their top 3 inside line leaders at snap leaders at inside linebacker to free agency, and their head coach is the guy who turned Patrick Queen into what he is today, Mike McDonald. And they have and I see a lot of people saying Geno Stone. I would be very, very surprised if Geno Stone and Patrick Queen aren't Seattle Seahawks, because guess what? They also let 2 of their safeties go in Seattle. Yep. And who would be better to fit that system than Patrick Queen and Geno Stone?
Let me ask you this, because I agree with you. Spotrac has him at 18 million market value for Patrick Queen. There's no chance he gets. There's no chance
a little
low. He's going to get more than 18 million.
Well, if you look at Roquan Smith got 5 for $100 million. 5 years for $100 million. typically, and Patrick Queen is just as good, if not maybe a little bit more versatile than Roquan Smith. And I believe he's a little bit younger than when Roquan Smith signed. So I wouldn't be surprised, because this is what everybody uses, right? Everybody's talking about market and all this stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe is 105. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying like he's going to be like breaking the bank, but if he's like 5-year 105, you know what I'm saying?
So in light of us making fun of people immediately reacting to a contract and saying yes or no, I'm going to immediately ask you to react to a contract and say yes or no. If it was 4 years, if it's 4 years, 80 million. Again, I'm using it as a
great.
You would spend $20 million a year on Patrick Queen and bring him in,
because you're not spending $20 million a year. That's just a contract value divided by 4. I would be perfectly fine with that, because I know that the first year cap hit's probably going to be 4.5 million. I know that the second's probably going to jump up to like 12 or 13 million, and then you probably have an out, and you're not really paying that much. So AAV doesn't really do it for me. I understand that it's the lazy man's tool to talk about contracts. I understand that's how everybody perceives value. I understand that's why agents love to use it and everything, because it's the number that makes the contract look the best. That's why it's always included in the agent texts that are sent to the media for them all to say the same thing. It's because it's the number that looks the best, but it never tells the whole story. So I know personally that 4-year, $80 million, it's probably really going to be 2 years, $30 million. You know what I'm saying? There's usually just
and that's what I was trying to say is, like, I know that's not really what it is, but like in theory that, let's do the silly overreaction thing.
Because that's where you should spend your money on in free agency. There's literal proof, and I still have yet to go pull up the exact wording and everything. But Sumer Sports, which is ran by Thomas Dimitrioff and Eric Eager, formerly of PFF. So PFF guy, data nerd, and a former GM have gotten together and created this thing called Sumer Sports. And they advise teams on how to use their cap space, use data, and all this stuff, right? So they take all this stuff, they're like a traveling analytics department or a mercenary analytics department, if you will.
Sounds perfect for you is what it sounds like.
They talked about how the Montez Sweat trade, even though he's not an inside linebacker, but they have talked about linebackers and other pieces, but they talked about how trading draft capital and getting an extension done at the time that they did for Montez Sweat is much better. It's Sumer, Sumer, is much better than going and trying to develop one or spending your money and draft capital elsewhere and stuff like that. Like, you get a lot of value out of linebackers in free agency if you land the right one. Patrick Queen is the right one.
Okay. That leads me.
The value of Azeez Al-Shaair compared to what they paid him.
Yeah, right.
And well, I think that's a perfect example.
Like, if you have a $4 million guy and a $20 million, again, I know it's not what it is, but in theory, really you have two guys for $24 million, which is actually not that crazy when you break down the two of them. So I want to skip. I know we plan to talk about Ridley in a minute, but we've already had questions about Chris Jones and about Christian Wilkins, both of whom are great players and would be awesome to have on the team. But like, can you make it work for that amount of money? More for Wilkins than for Jones because of the age. But Square Up says thoughts on trading for Snead, trading the 38th pick for Snead if you land Ridley. Now, number one, I don't know if that would get you L'Jarius Snead. I think you might. I don't know if just the 38th overall pick gets you that. But Ridley,
I think people are just clinging. I don't know where this started, but I think people are really clinging to this idea that the 38th pick will get you what you need in all these tagged players. I don't know where that started. I think it started with T. Higgins, but I don't know who started that, but that doesn't make any sense to me. Of course, I've heard two really bad trades for L'Jarius Snead recently, but it's been very interesting. Some of the trades that have been proposed.
So if Queen is your one guy, like, I'm not overpaying as much as I would love to see a Christian Wilkins type of player. I don't think that's the right use of. You have Jeffrey Simmons, you can supplement around him. This team has too many other holes that if I'm overpaying, I understand why you'd overpay for a particular player like Patrick Queen. I want to discuss Calvin Ridley because he's been the guy I have talked about for probably, I don't know, the better part of the entire offseason. not T. Higgins, not Michael, although I do think Michael Pittman would have been an excellent target, but that's not available. He's been tagged. We know T. Higgins has been tagged. There's no one else in free agency that I think would be considered at wide receiver that would be considered worth a larger contract. So let's just say more than $10 million-ish per year, again, on average, just to create a benchmark for people. Calvin Ridley's the only one that I think would even be in consideration for wide receiver one money, because everyone else available is not really a wide receiver one, doesn't deserve to get paid that much. But the question is, would he be worth it as a big ticket, quote unquote, big ticket item? And he's one of the only guys, especially if you don't think you're going to get one of the top 3 at 7 in the draft. If you think Odunze, Harrison, and Neighbors are all gone, which is very possible, all 3 of those guys could be gone by pick 7.
Very possible.
I'm just saying it is possible. It's improbable, but it's possible.
It's possible. I wouldn't say it's very possible, and I would say it's highly improbable that that's going to happen.
And we had a long conversation about prioritizing. We've had, every show, it feels like we're having a conversation about prioritizing offensive line and receiver. They do have a number 1 receiver already on the team in DeAndre Hopkins. They don't have a number 1 tackle at right or left spot. So that's the context for the discussion. But Calvin Ridley, this is a guy who wasn't exactly used perfectly by a current member of the Titans coaching staff for the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. Maybe. But this is a guy who is better. You can run him all over the formation. He was not used as much in that way last year. He's very successful all over the formation, which is something would be good to pair with DeAndre Hopkins, because then you can run him in all different formations. He wins routes on every single level, first, second, third level. He gets open at all times. I think he changes the offense. He's the one guy I would consider looking at. His age is weird because it's not like football playing years because of the amount of time he's been off. He's the one guy I might look at and overpay for if I was going to look at a high ticket item outside of, maybe Christian Wilkins or maybe a corner. But Ridley's the guy. So where are you at with Calvin Ridley? Is he a wide receiver 1 in your opinion?
He hasn't shown anything that he's a wide receiver 1, in my opinion. Now, that doesn't mean that he won't get paid like a wide receiver 1 by some team. I don't know. I don't really know. I know you're a big Ridley guy because I guess he autographed a football for you when he was in college or something. I know that sometimes you media people like to cross over into personal territory with players, but
you are perfect for PK. You are perfect for PK.com.
But I know this, that there has been a lot of smoke around Calvin Ridley's year last year in terms of commitment, being able to do what he needs to do, the talent level, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not entirely sure that Calvin Ridley is a number 1 wide receiver. Now, DeAndre Hopkins is a number 1 wide receiver. So I would be okay if you paid him wide receiver 2 money for Calvin Ridley to come in and be the number 2. I do like the idea of maybe you sign Calvin Ridley, you're able to get him, and then you do trade a pick or trade for L'Jarius Sneed. I think that could be a smart way to approach this offseason. It's not my top priority or my top anything, right, because I think that your long-term solution is not Calvin Ridley. Your long-term solution is not DeAndre Hopkins. So you have 2 not long-term solutions on your roster.
I agree.
And I think that Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, to a lesser extent, and some of these other guys can be long-term solutions at wide receiver. And I think one of those guys is going to be there. I don't like the wide receiver free agent market, which is deja vu, because last year I did not like the wide receiver free agent market. And everybody got mad that they didn't sign a wide receiver free agent by sometime during the summer. And then they ended up getting DeAndre Hopkins because it was a cost-cutting move by the Arizona Cardinals. Could there be something like that happens again? Maybe, but you can't bank on that kind of stuff. I just think that, I think the market for Calvin Ridley is going to be too high to justify the Titans spending that money. I think that's also, it's too high and it's unjustifiable by what he has been able to put together as a career so far. There is not wide receiver. He has not done anything to say that he is a wide receiver 1 in the NFL yet.
I tend to agree with almost everything you just said, but here's the strategy in my head is that while he is not a 4 or 5 year long-term solution at the position, that has to be developed through the draft. They have to get a young star player, and that could absolutely be number 7. That could be at 38. That could be trading back and getting Brian Thomas at 18. I'm making stuff up here, but like that's all possible. To me, it's because you have cap space, are you willing to overspend on the bridge player that protects you post Hopkins and then because here's the other thing. If you go get a big time receiver in the draft and you have Hopkins, rookie, and Ridley, you're asking Ridley to be a number 2. So maybe you overpay for him to be a 2, but he's a 2. All of a sudden your passing attack could be pretty dangerous and very helpful to the development of Will Levis. But you have to plan for Hopkins to roll off. So then Ridley slides over and becomes your DeAndre Hopkins, where he then for 2 years, let's say you give him a 3-year contract and maybe you overpay. He then becomes your bridge player to where the rookie then develops into the number 1 or 2. You have 2 high-end number 2s. Either way, you've got weaponry for your quarterback. So that's sort of the strategy behind it. And it doesn't mean that I disagree with anything you said. I don't, but
it's just like I know that he is going to get a contract in the range of, depending on, how many years, a 3 to 4. I feel like he's going to get a 3 to 4 year contract, and it's going to be like looking at like 100 million to 110 million, maybe 90 million if it's a 3-year. And I just feel like that's just too much for Calvin Ridley, who hasn't proven that he deserves that. Now, if you tell me that you could get a Christian Kirk type deal,
that's what I was thinking.
I'm all in. I'm all in for a Christian Kirk type deal. I don't think that's an overpay, but I think that what he's aiming for, or at least he's wanting. You don't always get what you want, but at least what we've heard that he's wanting to be paid like a wide receiver 1. And that's around where, AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel, those guys, and Calvin Ridley's just not as good as those guys.
No, he's not. He's
proven that he is that good. Now, doesn't mean because someone does say, Brian says that, Calvin has always lived in the shadows, and sure, kind of has lived under Julio Jones's shadow. Then he lived under the shadow of being suspended, so probably the shadow of his couch, and then he lived under the shadow of the very big shadow of Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram in Jacksonville. So sure, maybe, but you got to prove that you're a wide receiver 1, and maybe it is he didn't fit the system in Jacksonville. Maybe it's that he didn't put forth the effort that he should have. Maybe it's that he tried to put forth the effort, but he hadn't played in a year and a half, so maybe that's what it is. There's just so many unknown variables tied into the 2023 season for Calvin Ridley.
I agree.
I am not comfortable paying that top-end money, and that takes me into, because someone says, well, if not Ridley, then who? Well, definitely not Hollywood Brown. And I don't care what anybody tries to spin it on Hollywood Brown.
Sorry, Brian.
He stinks. He's terrible. He is a guy that you have to. Ryan Watson said this the other day to me, and he goes, because we were talking about Ladd McConkey. He says, if you have to plan your whole offense around making sure that one guy's deficiency or weakness in a game is never exposed, that's not very good. And Hollywood Brown is not the for sure A+ deep threat that everybody thinks. He has a horrible contested catch rate deep. He's the 17th percentile versus man, 51st percentile versus zone, which his zone success rate has gone down every year since he's been in the league. His size does not allow him to win consistently on the outside with the speed alone. And the problem is, if you put him in the slot, is that he's not going to get you yak. His yards after the catch is dependent on being schemed wide open. You can't have defenders near him because he's been brought down on first contact on 82.4% of his receptions. And this number has kept continuing to go up every season. So I am out on this guy. I do not care about the deep threat. If you need a guy to go run cardio to maybe be a deep threat, just keep Chris Moore. Keep Traylon Burks.
Right.
Draft a really fast guy that has a good 40 time in the 7th round.
I
There's
think
no place for
he's
Hollywood Brown in this team, and
no,
I think it'd be a
I
waste
agree.
of money.
I agree. I think he's better at like the intermediate passing game, like on the like especially in the corner routes. But again, that's a very isolated place that he's good. Going back to comparing him back to Ridley, I don't think is even close. Like to me,
No.
Ridley is good against
It's
man
Ridley
and
and
good.
everybody else, by the way.
Exactly. He's good against man. He's
That's
good
not
against
good.
He's good against man. He's good against zone. He can run every route tree. He gets open on every single route on the route tree. Here's the other thing about that I think is important about Ridley. And you just kind of alluded to it, but I think it is worth mentioning and going back to make sure we cover it up. This is a guy who sat out for a long period of time, and I want to say more than half of his drops were in the first couple of games of the season last year, meaning the first couple of games he had played football in over a year, I think a year and a half. And so there was clearly getting back into football that I think is okay in the first couple of games that he's back on the field to say, all right, there's some rust there. You got to shake it off. Okay, fine. Then, of course, the last month of the season, Trevor Lawrence couldn't stand. He had one leg. And that's not an excuse, but it's just a factor that contributed to maybe some lack of production in the offense and the Jacksonville Jaguars offense going downhill in the final month of the season. That doesn't change the evaluation of Ridley, but it is context that I think is important to analyze overall the production. He still had over 1,000 yards, and he still does things that other than Hopkins, no one else on this team can do. I agree it's an overpay if he's got to pay if you got to pay him that type of top tier money. The Christian Kirk deal was 4 years, $72 million. Ironically, Spotrac has Calvin Ridley exactly at that amount of money. He's worth about $18 million.
Which is fine. I mean, but
he's going to get more than that.
He's
going to get more.
He's going to get more than that. You are correct, because what did we just say? It's Calvin Ridley and everybody else.
Scarcity.
There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to want to pay Calvin Ridley more money than that. I would be shocked if he came in at that number.
Yeah, I agree.
And if he came into that number to the Tennessee Titans, I'd be even more shocked. And I would be happy with that move. Don't get me wrong, but I would be shocked because there are so many wide receiver needy teams. And I know everybody's like, well, the wide receiver class is very deep. You're not guaranteed. You cannot bank on the draft.
Yeah.
If you're not in a certain range of players, and you know that at least Calvin Ridley can get you 800 to maybe 1,300 yards, depending. That's his like range, right? He can at least get you that. Like, don't be mad if like the Chiefs spend a lot of money on Calvin Ridley and act like, well, the Tennessee Titans should have paid more. They probably shouldn't have paid more because they don't have Patrick Mahomes. Like the Chiefs
they're not trying to defend their Super Bowl. What?
Yeah. Like to me, it's like Calvin Ridley's going to go wherever he gets paid the most money. And this market's going to dictate that he's going to get paid a lot more money than what you think.
Favorite comment so far, Logan, you're the winner today. We should sign Devontae Parker. He is ranked last in separation for 4 straight years. The Titans haven't had that kind of consistency at wide receiver in ages. I do think it's interesting to think of DeAndre Hopkins and Ridley together as not like neither one of them is a true number one relative to like, Jamar Chase or Devontae Adams or, like guys that are in their prime who are elite number ones. But I could see them both as being like either the 2 best number 2s or like 2 of the worst number 1s. And if you put them together, you have a pretty damn good combination. In 4 years, $100 million, give or take, however that money works out. You could do a lot worse with that kind of salary money for them, but definitely not. We all agree. No Hollywood Brown. He is not the take the top off the defense phrase guy that everyone thinks he is because he's fast. But let's move on to some of the other smaller markets here. You mentioned middle linebacker. I do think that if you're going to be strategic with your spending, and we've talked about this, go back and listen to our offensive and defensive shows. There are tons of openings on the roster. They need to fill spots with warm bodies. There are a few positions where I think you can be extremely shrewd. You can spend lower tier dollars just like they did last year, and they can get really good contributing members. And so what are some of the markets? I think running back is one of them. What are some of the markets you really like where this team can be really savvy and smart with its money?
I still think linebacker, because like we said, even if you miss out on Patrick Queen is kind of like in the Calvin Ridley tier. It's him and everybody else. It's Patrick Queen and everybody else. Azeez Al-Shaair, Jerome Baker, Blake Cashman, Willie Gay, Akeem Davis-Gaither, Anthony Walker, Sion Takitaki, Josie Jewell, Nicholas Marr are some guys that I highlighted for paulkarski.com. Go read more about those over there. You get 2 of those guys, including a Patrick Queen, to that list. And if you walk away with 2 of those guys in free agency, your linebacker room doesn't matter really the conversation. As a whole, your starting linebackers are better than your starting linebackers of last year. So that's what matters, right?
Okay.
In 2024, it's not that you have to have one elite guy and one average guy. If you come in with 2 average guys, that's better than what you had last year. So linebacker is really deep in that way. Safety is deep in another way. A lot of big names, a lot of talent out there. You only need one, and you could get maybe a Justin Simmons paired with a Kayvon Wallace combination, and then you have Amani Hooker, Elijah Molden. Suddenly you're 1,000 times better at safety because you still got Amani Hooker. Corner, the corner market is weird. There's about 4 or 5 guys.
They have to get somebody though.
They have to find guys, but I don't know how the money's going to work in free agency for the cornerback position. And that's kind of where I'm at. It's kind of hard to get a read on it because you saw Jalen Johnson go. You saw Jalen Johnson head out. The L'Jarius Sneed is tagged. It's just really, really weird in that market. And I don't know what it's going to look like for everybody because you got Chidobe Awuzie, you got Jeffrey Kuda with ties to the team. Kayla Witherspoon is another guy. Meek Robertson, Arthur Mallett, what's the guy's name? Ronald Darby, Rock Yassin. You got a lot of guys that have been tied to this team in one form or the other. I just don't know what it's going to look like in terms of how much money these guys are going to command. Yeah. But you should be able to, kind of like the linebackers, walk away, including maybe even bringing back Sean Murphy-Bunting, 2 to 3 of these guys, and have 3 outside. You need 3 outside guys.
Yep.
Okay, Trey Avery could play inside. Eric Garrett could play inside if Roger McCreary gets hurt, or one of these outside guys can move in. You need 3 outside guys. How you choose to fill those spots is up to you. And I think that you could walk away with 2 in free agency. I just don't know really what it's going to look like, what that market looks like. But I think that you should walk away with 2 free agents and still draft one. Like I think you still need to draft one. But now you maybe not have to draft one high.
I feel very similarly, but in different phases of the draft about running back and middle linebacker. Like I really like those 2 classes of free agents, but I also really like those spots in the draft later to draft those guys. I think I would include interior offensive line in this group as well. I think there's some really good names in the draft in rounds 5, 6, and 7 that you could get that could be a really good depth center or maybe even a starting interior offensive lineman. But I think the free agency class for the interior offensive lineman is clearly better than the tackle class and smarter. And so what really ends up leading us to, and I'll get to your question here in just a second, Ed, which I think is an excellent part of all of this. It does feel like tackle and receiver, you could argue, are 2 of the biggest needs for the Titans. You could also argue those are 2 of the worst classes in free agency, and also the deepest classes in the draft. Sometimes the logic just lines up too well to ignore it. So ultimately, Ed asked the question here: do you think they will do enough in free agency that will make their first pick less predictable than now? Because right now, it seems fairly predictable that it is going to be tackle or receiver. Do you think what they do could change that?
I think it will make it murky, more than likely, because I think that they'll sign a wide receiver and left tackle, but the quality and the contracts will tell you if any of those positions have been eliminated from number 7. So it's going to come down to what the contracts say. To me, here's my overarching philosophy for the Tennessee Titans and their approach to free agency. There's a lot of good, young, quality defenders. And then there's like 5 on the offensive side of the ball, besides running back. The bulk of their free agents and the bulk of the money that they spend, so the bulk of the percentage of the money that they spend, should be on the defensive side of the ball. I think that that's where your focus should be in free agency, is the defensive side of the ball. You can revamp and change your entire defense, find guys that fit, push these scrubs out of the way. The way to handle your free agent class is to spend the bulk of the money in free agency. It does not mean to ignore wide receiver and offensive line and running back. I just think that the bulk of your free agency need to come from there, because I'd much rather spend money on I just forgot everybody I said earlier.
Ultimately, to your point about percentages, you could go sign 2 running backs and not spend more than $5 million. Like you could go sign two running backs, and so it looks like you're investing, but you're not, because it's not. Those guys are further down the list and not big ticket items. So
center is my big offensive ticket item. If I'm spending, if I'm going to slightly overpay or spend a lot of money, it's going to be on center. So like if they walked away with James Becton, a wide receiver, a tight end, and one more additional O-line guy, and not some big expensive tight end, or not some big expensive O-line guy, but they walked away with that. That's a good haul on the offense side of the ball. Then spend money, and those are guys you could probably get for relatively cheap, and then compared to what you can spend and get on defense. So like go spend the big money on defense, in my opinion, this year. Get you some young, good guys under some long-term contracts that are proven guys, not projects, not one-year deals. Get some proven guys that are young and put them up there. I love the James kid from from Las Vegas. I like Lloyd Cushenberry, and I like Mitch Morse, and I'm sure there's going to be someone.
Mitch Morse would be good, yeah.
And like I said, Becton is a guy that I would take that's a guy you take a 1-year flyer on, is a guy like Becton. And if it's a deal similar to what you gave Andre Dillard, that's not a big deal in this year's class, in this year's free agency, in this year's salary cap situation for Tennessee Titans. Give him an Andre Dillard deal that you gave him last year. That's essentially a 1-year deal. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine with taking a flyer on that. I'm not as concerned as other people about what they do on offense and free agency this year, except for its center, because center is the value. These people who want to win on Win-Woo, you have Daniel Brunskill. That to me doesn't make any sense unless you're going to move Brunskill over to center and Win-Woo takes the right guard spot. He is not a tackle. I don't know who needs to hear it more, but if someone tells you that he's a tackle, he is not a tackle for this offensive scheme. You don't hire one of the best wide zone offensive line coaches in America, in history of the NFL, second only to Alex Gibbs, to run the gap scheme.
Are you talking about Brunskill?
No, Brunskill's fine. I'm talking about Win-Woo. He is not a right
He's not a good tackle. Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Trey brings up something. Will he be in shape on Becton? That is a tired narrative. He was actually lost a lot of weight and was in shape heading into the Jets last year, according to what I read. So that is kind of like a stigma that's still on him from I think he gained like 30 pounds from the combine to his first year.
Good question about Connor Williams. I know a lot of people asking about the Connor Williams. He will be right at about 9 months recovering from an ACL.
Yeah,
right at the start of camp. Right at the start of camp, or the start of the season.
You may be able to get him at a discount, though. That's the thing. You may be able to get him at a discount. So it's tough, though. That's a tough one to swallow.
That's a tricky one.
But it's not necessarily a deal breaker.
Okay, to your point though. Here's an ultimate, and maybe this is a framework that we need to make sure we reiterate a lot. If you're not going to try to win a Super Bowl this year, why not take the discounted center that could play for 4 years for you? Like I could see that being the decision making final thing that pushes you over the top one way or the other, which is like, look, this is why we're not going to sign Ridley for a big dollar contract, because we don't need to win today, and we're not one wide receiver away. But you know what? This center, we can get a discounted rate, who probably isn't ready for the first month of the season. Well, guess what? We're paying him for? We're paying him for the next 3.5 years. And maybe those are the years we need to have a really good center.
The reason why I want to spend money on a center so bad is because, first off, I know that they're going to try to give or allow Will Levis the opportunity to call a lot of protections at the line. It may not end up that well, so spend money on a center, because then you could have your next Ben Jones. Like, you need your next Ben Jones. You need the guy that you find in free agency that could become your center for 4 to 5 years, that could be the leader of the locker room. There's guys in this class. This is the time to spend on center and find that next center.
Connor Williams could absolutely be that guy. There's no question about that.
And he could. And I'm not too concerned with the ACL, but we all know that ACL injuries typically,
you got to be patient.
You got to be patient. So are you going to spend, but you may be able to get him at a discount. So that's the thing, is that it may be one of those things where he has an incentive laden contract, or a contract that kicks up higher as the years go up. And so maybe that's a good investment for you. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not really. There's not many centers that I'm really out on, but I think the top 4: Connor Williams, in no order, by the way. Connor Williams, James from Las Vegas, Mitch Morse, and Lloyd Cushenberry are the guys that you need to really focus in on. And if you don't get your top choice, you go to the next one down. If you don't get that guy, you go to the next one down. You got to keep going down. You don't give up.
Is there a guard that you like that would feel comfortable with you pushing Brunskill to center? Because there's some good guards on the board too.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are. I mean, I'm not too. I have not familiarized myself with the vaunted guard free agent class because I don't think the Titans need a guard. But that's just me.
No, I agree. They need an interior offensive lineman though, for sure. Center specifically.
And I don't. I'd have to check to see where he played. John Runyon is a guy to keep your eye on, but I don't know where he actually played. Was he right or left guard? Probably.
I don't know. Right? I don't know. I think you. Yeah, I don't know that one.
Some Green Bay Packers fan you are.
Well, they moved. Literally every offensive lineman got moved into a different position last year. Like they all moved and rotated the entire time.
Right guard. So there's a guy to keep your eye on. That he wasn't that great last year, but he was better than Brunskill was. And he's a guy that Chad Brinker's familiar with, J.O.'s familiar with. So that's a guy that could put on your radar. Him and Yosh Neiman. Is it Neiman or Njemin? Either way.
Again,
2 Green Bay Packers guys that are young that I think that you could get for cheap and they fill positions of need. Like if you wanted to put Brunskill and Runyon next to each other, Brunskill at center, Runyon at right guard, I think that's fine.
Packers fans just want a left tackle who is on the field. That's all they want. Sinkers that doesn't take 4.5 years to recover from a knee injury. Sinkers beverages.
Was Zach Tom not your all's left tackle this year?
No, David Bakhtiari. David Bakhtiari is has been like the quote unquote left tackle for 4 years, and he's only played like one of those 4 years. He's not there.
Oh, Zach Tom's been playing your right tackle position.
Right. Again, they moved every one of those offensive linemen around the entire year last year. Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group. Those are our 2 great local, amazing sponsors and partners, locally owned businesses here in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you are shopping for booze, Sinkers Beverages, their sister store, Blue Gas Beverages in Hendersonville, please go sign up for the in crowd. It's their like preferred customer list. It's not a big commitment. They will give you really cool access to cool allocations if you're a bourbon fan. They've got great beverages. They got a great selection. They got a great staff to help you. And of course, I'm telling you, the only way you're going to be able to attend or be a part of our phenomenal and amazing and spectacular draft party that's going to be even better than it was last year, and it was pretty awesome last year, is if you sign up for the in-crowd. We're going to give you more of those details, not next week, but the following week. We should have everything ironed out. We're working on how to make it like the best draft party to go to in Nashville. That is the goal, to make it the best possible draft party in Nashville. Kingston
maybe
Group,
one of the few, and maybe the only real one.
Kingston Group, of course, Build KG. No, every other media company in this town does a draft party, and none of them are going to be as good as ours. I'm just telling you, none of them. Maybe the Titans draft party itself, like the one that the Titans actually put on, because they're a multi-billion-dollar business. Maybe that one will be better, but I guarantee you,
but you can't really go get plowed if you want to in front of all those people.
No. We know where Zach's head's at. Kingston Group, of course, buildkg.com is the website. All right, last one here on trade rumors real fast. We've kind of addressed this, I guess, briefly with L'Jarius Sneed. Make sure you sign up for stackintheinbox.com, football and other F words, paulkarski.com, etc. Trade rumors. How do you feel about going to get one of these guys? And I guess L'Jarius Sneed's the name that people are talking about, but I think we've covered everything else. So.
The Tennessee Titans are doing what all good teams do. They inquired about L'Jarius Sneed, and that's all they need to do. He played through knee injuries all through last year, and he was still great. Don't get me wrong, but he struggled all year physically. I think that you're going to have to give up more than just a second-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed. I don't understand, like, these. If they were so good, if they weren't good, you wouldn't want to give up a second-round pick, and now you want to try and steal them. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Your buddy Jared Stillman, your mentor, he said that he would trade. He would trade. This is the trade offer that he thinks the Kansas City Chiefs would take: Peter Skoronski for Joe Thuney and L'Jarius Sneed. No picks, Just straight up. Like, where does people come up with this? The other one was someone said it was you give your second round pick for L'Jarius Sneed and you get Kansas City's third round pick back. I don't remember who said that, but someone wrote that in an article. I'm like, who the fuck comes up with this shit? You would get laughed at by the Chiefs. They would seriously laugh at you. Maybe they would just say politely hang up, stifling their laughter. And then after they hung up, they were like, they're going around the office and everybody at Arrowhead saying, oh man, you're not gonna believe this call that Rank Carthon just gave me. This guy's an idiot.
My face hurts. Still just thinking about Jared Stillman being my mentor. He's a lovely he's a lovely man, but get the fuck out of here. So I look, Kingston Group, Sinkers Beverages. I do appreciate all you guys hanging out. Great crowd today on the show. Stoney Keeley in for me on Monday. He will give you a complete, even more in-depth primer for all these guys. It's going to be a ton of fun next week as, again, 11 a.m. Central Time on Monday. Legal tampering begins, and then free agency Wednesday, 3 p.m. It begins as well. We've got a ton of content for you. StackingTheInbox.com, PaulKarski.com, the Hot Read Podcast, the Music City Audible, football and other F words, and, of course, a football show right here brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. SEC Football Live, if you need a little college football break from all this NFL stuff. There is no better place to get content than all of us. I'm telling you, it's if you're a Titans fan, these are the folks you need to be hanging out with. It's why I'm working with you guys, and I think you guys are all doing a great job. So stay tuned to Full 40 Sports YouTube page, the podcast feed, and all the other great shows. We do appreciate you guys. Otherwise, have a great weekend. For Zach, I am Braden. We will talk to you next week.